Since 1996, the Reverend Canon Charles P. Gibbs has served as founding executive director of the United Religions Initiative, a global interfaith network for world peace active in 75 countries. He has been a featured speaker at many international gatherings, including the Parliament of the World's Religions and the United Nations. Some of you have read his essay, Opening the Dream Beyond the Limits of Otherness, which appears in the series Deepening the American Dream. He also co-authored Birth of a Global Community, a book on the founding of the United Religions Initiative, and has published many articles on interfaith work. Charles Gibbs brings to his work a deep commitment to spiritual transformation and to work for peace, justice, and healing, as well as an abiding belief in the sacredness of all life on the planet. His wife, Debbie, is head of the Lowell School in Washington, D.C., and their children are educators as well. In the years with URI, Canon Gibbs has traveled extensively working with religious, spiritual, and other leaders in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, South America, and Asia to build a global community of over 500,000 members. Please welcome Charles Gibbs to speak on the topic, Building Interfaith Community, Fostering World Peace.
You know, we have been in the presence of beauty and truth, passion and commitment so far, and I'm deeply moved by what I've heard. I don't know about you, but there is so much goodness in the human community, and we hear so little about it. But this afternoon, we've been privileged to hear some extraordinary words from remarkable people who shine light in this world. And it's a privilege to be in their presence and in your presence today to celebrate the International Day of Peace. I'd like to thank Father Pittman and the people of St. Peter's for opening this beautiful space to us today. I was in Amman, Jordan in June, and there was a mosaic that looks so much like that one. I feel I'm back in the Middle East sitting here. I'd like to thank the organizing committee whose passion and commitment made this day possible. It is a gift to be able to come together. It is a gift to be able to feel our common humanity and to connect in a way that hopefully will shine greater light into the world. 65 years ago, these words were signed, launching the United Nations. We, people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to humankind, have resolved to combine our efforts, to accomplish these aims. In 1981, the UN established the International Day of Peace, and in 2001, they pegged it to this day, September 21st. As we gather here today, we are in community with people who look a lot like us and people who look nothing like us, people who dress a lot like us and dress nothing like us, people in cities, towns, and villages all over the world who, at least for one moment, share a vision and an experience of peace and prove that peace is possible. Every year when the International Day of Peace is commemorated at the UN, the Secretary General goes out into the Peace Garden and rings a peace bell. The bell is cast from pennies contributed by children all over the world. And every time I've seen that bell, it raises in me the question, Charles, what are you contributing to help there be peace in the world? And I think that's a question that is appropriate for all of us on this day. What are we contributing to help make the world a more peaceful place? There's another bell that is rung on the International Day of Peace at the UN, and it's at a ceremony that includes young people, a focus for them to help give their voices to peace. And that bell is cast from metal, from weapons that have been melted down and turned into a bell for peace. And that asks the question, what are we willing to do to transform the means of violence into the means of peace? Or as a prophet once said, to beat our swords into plowshares. This is the day when we're called especially to ask those questions of ourselves. And not only for ourselves, but for the whole world. I'd like to take a moment now to have us invite the world to join us in this gathering. We're in this beautiful place, not only hearing about peace, but experiencing it. There's an opportunity afterwards to share food together. And yet we know too many of our sisters and brothers have not peace. They have nothing or little to eat. And sadly, we don't have to go outside of this country to find those sisters and brothers. We don't even have to go outside this city or any other city in the United States. I'd like us to invite into our midst, in a moment of silence, our sisters and brothers from all over the world who yearn for peace and yet live in the midst of conflict, who yearn for food to eat and yet go to sleep and wake up hungry, whose children do not have the privilege of an education, and whose elders are not allowed to grow old in security and dignity. Let's invite the spirits of those people to be with us now. Thank you. I'd like to share with you now the words that the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, offered for the International Day of Peace. He said, "Friends, today we observe the annual International Day of Peace, a day dedicated to ceasefire and nonviolence. That is why each year on this day I ring the peace bell. And it is why every day here and around the world I work for peace. I work with antagonists to help them resolve their differences peacefully. I sound the alarm about threats, those we can see clearly and those just over the horizon. I promote tolerance, justice, and human rights. I campaign for harmony among countries and peoples. This year, Peace Day is dedicated to young people. We have just entered the International Day of Youth. The theme of the year, dialogue and mutual understanding, captures the very essence of peace. Young people today are at home with global diversity. They are comfortable in an interconnected world, yet they are also vulnerable to the forces of extremism. So I say to all governments and our partners, let us do more to give them a world of tolerance and opportunity. We've heard from some of those partners today. And there are millions of partners around the world, people who roll up their sleeves and every day work to make the world a more peaceful and just place for not just themselves, not just for people who are somehow like them, but they recognize that in a fundamental way, all people are like them. As a beautiful poem from Carl Sandburg said, we are one humanity. And I would like to greet you this morning on behalf of the members of one of those partner organizations, the United Religions Initiative. As the United Nations came into being with the Charter, the United Religions Initiative came into being as people spoke a charter into being over a period of time. And that charter begins with these words: we, people of diverse religions, spiritual expressions, and indigenous traditions throughout the world, hereby establish the United Religions Initiative to promote enduring daily interfaith cooperation, to end religiously motivated violence, and to create cultures of peace, justice, and healing for the earth and all living beings. As we sit here today, our sisters and brothers in the URI community send their greetings of love and peace to everyone here. Right now, it's closing in on 3 a.m. in Sydney, Australia, where Jessie Kaur Singh, a Sikh activist, has finished her observation of International Day of Peace. It's 1 a.m. in Kuala Lumpur, where Amir Farid Isaac, a wonderful Muslim leader, has finished leading an interfaith community in their observance of the International Day of Peace. It is about 10:30 in the evening in West Bengal, India, where a Hindu leader, Biswadev Chakraborty, and his band Ektan, which is an interfaith band whose name means with one note, have celebrated the International Day of Peace with music and service, showing their part of India that indeed we are one people. It's 8 p.m. now, actually, in Jerusalem. Ilana Rosen, and right next door in Hebron, Tariq Al-Tamimi, a Jew and a Muslim, have shared a commemoration of the International Day of Peace, aiming not only for the peace they have come to know as colleagues in this work, but for a peace that can take deep root in the Holy Land. At the same time, in Addis Ababa, Musi Hailu, a Christian leader, has gathered people from the African Union in Addis Ababa, and together with religious leaders and people working through all sorts of grassroots organizations, they have celebrated the International Day of Peace together. It's 2 p.m. in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Rosalie Gutierrez, who is a member of the Koya people, has found ways in her journey to overcome hatred toward the Christian communities who have nearly obliterated her people, and been able to reach out and build bridges, and together they have celebrated the International Day of Peace. And right now it's 10 a.m. on the West Coast. And I think of my dear partner, my dear friend, Masato Kawahatsu, who is a priest in the Kanko Church, who is an offshoot of the Shinto faith in Japan. Mas and his community and the larger interfaith community in San Francisco will be gathering in another couple of hours as we are gathering to reflect on how together we have, we are, and we can in the future be increasingly powerful instruments for peace. The UN celebrated the International Day of Peace after establishing it on the 21st of September, celebrated it this year on the 17th of September. And that's because there was something else happening on the 21st. And that was the beginning of the summit to review progress on the Millennium Development Goals. And if there is an engine for peace in this world that everyone ought to be able to sign up for, it's the commitment to realize the Millennium Development Goals. Let me just run through them quickly for you. To eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. To achieve universal primary education. To promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. To reduce child mortality. To improve maternal health. To combat HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. To ensure environmental sustainability, and to create global partnerships for development. The nations of the world have committed to those goals on the behalf of the peoples of the world. And some people are working at high levels that affect hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of people. And other people are working in the grassroots in ways that might affect 5 or 10 or 100 people. And I believe each one of those efforts times 1,000 is needed. We're being called to a consciousness that we are all one people on this earth, that as we cherish the diversity of a beautiful garden, or the diversity of food that can show up on our table for a marvelous meal, we should learn to cherish the diversity of humanity. To understand that it's not an accident that we are so different and yet we are one. To come to reach out, to know each other, to respect each other, to learn from and be enriched by each other. To be able to cherish our uniqueness and yet claim a common humanity. Years ago, I was picked up in the early hours of the morning on a New York street by a cab driver when I thought I would wait for hours to get to the airport. The cab driver happened to be from Pakistan. And we started talking, and after he told me a little bit about his life, he asked me what I did. I told him about the work of the United Religions Initiative, and he said, you know, that's so important, because even though I'm a Pakistani, I have felt all my life that before I'm a Pakistani, I'm a citizen of the earth. And even though I am a Muslim, and I am fed and enriched by my Muslim faith, I know that before I am a Muslim, I am a child of God. I said to him, I've said those same words again and again, but instead of Muslim, I've said Christian. Instead of Pakistani, I've said American. And knowing that our Buddhist sisters and brothers might not say, I'm a child of God, we can still acknowledge that we are all from the same source, and we all share this precious earth together. And the hour is late for us to reach out to each other, to embrace ourselves as neighbors, and to find common cause, rolling up our sleeves and addressing the challenges before us. There's no reason to pretend that things are not desperate in so many ways. We have squandered so many precious resources developing the capacities to be violent against each other. It's past time that we diverted those resources to create the means for peace. The U.S. and the Soviet Union, armed to the teeth, could, at the push of a button, create a nuclear winter that would end the possibility for life on this planet. Some of us remember the fearsomeness of those days. I spent 2 days at a cathedral in Minneapolis studying nuclear arms issues. It was late October, and when I left, I was about as depressed as I've been in this life. I thought, there's no way in the world we can solve this problem. The button's going to be pushed, and everything I cherish will be gone. I was driving home. It was gray sky, and the night before there'd been a huge windstorm. All the trees were just these dead-seeming branches against the sky. When I got home, I looked up into the yard, and we had these 2 huge maple trees that had created an ocean of leaves in the front yard. My son, who at that point was not quite 2, was dressed in this nice blue outfit to keep him warm and out in the leaves. I sat on the front porch with my wife, and we watched as the light began to fade. And Ben would shuffle through this mountain of leaves, and every now and then stoop down and pick one up. And then he'd shuffle back to a little garbage can in the middle of the yard and drop his leaf into it. When it finally got too dark and too cold to stay outside, we went in and had dinner. And that night I was sitting in my study, and I looked down at this ocean of leaves, and I thought, what Ben was doing was really silly. I could have picked up more leaves in my hands in one moment than he did in a half an hour. And then I thought, no, Charles, that's the wrong way to look at this. What Ben was doing was being faithful. He was seeing a leaf that for some reason or other called to him. And he went and he picked it up and he took care of that leaf. And then he looked for the next one. And friends, I think that's what we're called to do. We can't worry that there are far more leaves than we can ever take care of. That ultimately is the work of our source, however we know that source. But we can ask, what is the leaf that calls to me? How am I called to invest myself for peace? How am I called to give myself to help this world in the transformation against violence, away from violence and destruction, into creating a just and sustainable community for all life? We need to ask that question and not underestimate our capacity to be agents for change, and not underestimate the incredible power that happens when we come together like this in community, and we see not just our little light, but the light of hundreds, thousands, ultimately of billions of people, shining against the darkness that can be so fearsome at times, and to believe that together we have the capacity to transform the challenges that plague the earth community now into blessings. We can live in a transformed way on a transformed earth. And for the lives not yet present on this earth, we owe it to those to come, as well as those already here, to challenge ourselves to find what calls to us, and to be bold, to be committed, and to trust that together we can be the peace we wish to see in the world, and we can help make that peace a reality. Thank you.
Children of the world could live together in I've been asked to say something about leaving as peacemakers. This morning, my eyes fell upon just a few words by Robert Fulcrum, who said that peace is not wishing for something. It is something that you do, it's something that you make, something that you are, and something that you give away. It's interesting to me, after hearing all the wonderful things that everyone is doing, that at the end of this session we're reminded in song, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." I'd like to invite you to just take a moment to engage in an exercise that is a reminder of the peace that we are and can be, because we can experience that right now and in any moment that we choose. There's an organization I'm associated with that engages in Be Peace. And one of the things that we do, if you care to join in, and you might put your hand on your heart as just a physical reminder of it, if you join in with me and close your eyes just for a moment, put your attention just in your heart. Breathe as you are breathing from the heart itself. And bring to mind something for which you are grateful. It's probably that very thing that brings a smile that just comes up and from within you when you're reminded. If we could just take a moment at any time that we need to experience peace, that is a way of allowing it to begin with us.